Hey guys, it's JT Tran from the ABCs of Attraction, and I have a very special guest, Erik Carlberg from Dating Coach for Men, as well as Mysteries Wingman. How you doing, Erik?
Hey, I'm doing great, man.
So tell our audience a little bit about you. Like, obviously, my guys are like Asian, so they're probably not aware of what you do and your relationship with mystery and what you teach. So give our guys a quick bio.
Yeah, so I first learned that there was even such a thing as a dating coach in my early 20s, about 22, 23 years old. I was going through a bad breakup. I had little puppy loves and whatnot before that, but this was the first time I was like, oh my God, my life is over, right? My
Yeah.
girlfriend broke up with me. What am I going to do? And I turned to all my friends and family members to try to figure out how to get her back. And none of what they said was sufficient to me. So I went on Google and I was like, Google, how do I get my ex back? And I was introduced to the wacky world of dating coaches and pickup artists and seduction gurus and the whole nine. And I got sucked into reading everything I could. Uh, my story is a little bit atypical in the sense that I have a little bit of a natural background. There were guys that were better than me with women growing up, but I did better than most. I put myself out there and I was very social. But nonetheless, when I discovered this stuff and I learned that I could grow it like a skill, like grow like a muscle, I was just intrigued by that. So at 22, 23 years old, I knew that nobody was going to pay for coaching with me. So I needed to learn. So I started basically throwing myself into this stuff full throttle for 4 years, 5 years. And then I reached out to a local Chicago company, started coaching part-time. Very quickly, I was doing everything. I was handling all of the incoming leads, doing all the coaching, flying around the country, even like developing the curriculum. And I started my own business at the age of 30, and I parted ways with that company. 4 years later, I reached out to Mystery, the pickup artist, Mystery, and said that I wanted to coach with him, that I had always imagined myself coaching with him when I was a little, duckling first getting into this stuff. He was like the biggest name in town, right? The Game
Oh, yeah.
came out, the VH1 show. So yeah, it was kind of a really cool thing to meet Mystery and start coaching with him about age 34. And recently I just did a rebrand with my company. I used to be Coast to Coast Dating Coach. I'm now datingcoachformen.com. So I've been around a while. I've been coaching for a good 15 years, but I haven't had much of a presence on social media. So I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to ramp up some social media, do some interviews, get my name out there. For a while, I was able to just kind of do this through word of mouth and running a few ads. And like now I'm looking to scale things up. So I have kind of run the gauntlet of different experiences as far as pickup, dating advice, like having a little bit of a natural background. I'm somebody that's really into this stuff. This isn't something that I just decided to do. Similar to you, I've been in this for a while. I think you've been in it for a few more years than me, but it's been a while, man. It's been a while for
Yeah.
me. So,
Like, I have such great respect for Mystery because I learned from him like way back in the day of like Project Hollywood when I took his boot camp when it was just like $600, right? It was
mhm.
such a revelation for me to see that this was possible. It almost felt like a superpower in a way that finally I could take control of my love life. Where before I felt like really sort of like helpless or what they say is like, you either got it or you don't. And growing up,
Mhm.
I didn't have it, right? Being
Mhm.
like a short Asian guy. And obviously being like, working with mystery shows that you got the street cred for it because, mystery isn't going to just take anybody. But in addition to having your own pickup chops, you are engaged, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So congratulations for that.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you very much.
yeah, I know a lot of my audience are interested in having a relationship, girlfriend, maybe even getting married. We typically tend to concentrate with my clientele the beginning phases because that is a very large weakness for a lot of guys who don't feel confident or don't know how to approach, don't know how to build attraction. But the majority are definitely looking for the girlfriend and to settle down. So, why don't you talk a little bit about maybe like how you met your girlfriend and, how that informed your experience when it comes to coaching guys? who are looking for a relationship?
Yeah. So first of all, I agree with you. You know, the toughest part of this, in my opinion, are those initial phases. You know what I mean? I call this element one, which deals with all things attraction related. That's personality based attraction and physical attraction. I think that element two, which is a psychological bond in my model, right? I think that that's more important for an enduring relationship for most people. But if we don't get our foot in the door, we're never going to get to that deeper stuff, you know. So that initial phase of getting a woman to see us as having some sort of romantic potential, that is a very, very tough part of the process. It may not be the most meaningful over the long term. It may be more transient, you know, 5 years, 10 years, and so forth down the line, but nonetheless we need that initial breakthrough, right? Yeah, and so for as far as my girlfriend, my fiance goes, you know, and girlfriends past as well, you know, I think that I've always been a little bit more oriented toward that, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, I've run the gauntlet of experience with pickup as well. I got into this at 22, okay? I was brokenhearted, hormones raging,
Oh, yeah.
and I studied everything when I got into this. You know, there was not, you know, I studied everything, seduction, pickup, and then more holistic dating advice. I even took stuff that wasn't related to dating and applied it. Spirituality and meditation, everything channeled into my game, right? But I think that I always sought to have more like quality connections with women, even when I was just wanting to hook up and be adventurous. I typically had like a rule where if I only wanted to hook up with somebody once, I probably shouldn't hook up with them at all. You know, if you're seeing someone
Okay.
and you're like, "Yeah, I do that once, but maybe not again," like, that's, you know, you're kind of like, "What are you doing at that point?" You know what I mean? So, I've always taken a little bit more of a holistic approach to this. Uh, every single girlfriend, short term and long term, that I've ever had has, uh, you know, fueled my understanding of all this. I feel like women are the greatest coaches. You know, we need regular dating coaches though to kind of translate what's going on. But you know, my experiences with women have really shaped and molded my coaching. Um, Specifically, you know, I just think about all of my experiences all the time. Anytime I'm teaching something, I'm asking myself, like, if I was giving this advice to somebody and they were going to use it on somebody who I had a relationship with that I cared about a lot, you know, is this solid advice? You know, so integrity is not just a buzzword for me. I'm very, very, I don't want to say uptight, but I'm very strict about the way I teach certain things. You know, even with mystery, when I'm coaching with mystery and stuff, you know, there are certain terms that I don't use, like compliance, for example. Like, you know, compliance as we use it in the pickup scene and dating scene is not meant to be like you must comply with my orders, right? But it just has a ring to it that I don't like. I use reciprocity. I prefer
Sure.
the word reciprocity. So, um, yeah, I don't know if I'm fully answering your question here, but essentially every relationship that I've ever had has sort of fueled my coaching, and I gather bits and pieces from all of it, and this is what's allowed me to sort of backwards engineer my model. My model that I have, which takes a guy from meeting a woman to beginning a loving relationship, so, you know, anywhere from a 3-week to a 6-month timeline, that is all backward engineered from my experiences with relationships, particularly ones where I was in love. So,
Yeah, I mean, they're showing that the Gen Z males is this epidemic of loneliness, right?
mm,
Extending beyond just this sort of growing stigma or fear against approaching, it seems like a lot of guys are just, scared of even starting a relationship. So, well, here's a question for you. How does a man know, all right, when he's ready to actually be in a relationship?
oh man, I mean, I personally think that it's one of those things where you should just jump in. You know, life is never going to be perfectly aligned. I mean, look, if you're in dire straits, if you're completely broke, your health is shit, you know, you don't have a job, like you have so much stuff that you need to get lined up. Certainly get those things squared away. But there have been times in my life where I didn't have a lot going on for me. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a great job. I didn't have my college degree yet because I chose to take a few years off after high school. I went back and crushed it in college. I actually graduated the top student at my university when I finally went back. But um, throughout that whole process, essentially my entire life, I've dated women. I've been in relationships, short term or long term, and many women will accept you not being, completely up to speed in every area of life. They want to be with somebody that they can grow with. I think there's kind of this misconception out there that women are expecting guys to be perfect and have all their shit handled.
Oh yeah.
And I think women are much more down to earth and understanding than they're given credit for in the manosphere. The manosphere, to generalize, kind of paints women as these like shallow, superficial, hypergamous. She's going to trade you in for a dude with more money and a nicer car. And like that has not been my experience at all. Certainly, there are some women that fit that category. And there may be a natural female tendency to gravitate toward safety, and sometimes those qualities can represent safety, but I think it's much more important to just be the best person that you can be and learn what a woman's particular ideal is, and what your ideal is, as opposed to fitting some mold that you think you need to fit and then finding a girlfriend. Start dating, start meeting women. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to learn that uh, they're much more down to earth and accepting than we may think.
Yeah, I think there's this fallacy. I see this a lot with guys that, are thinking about getting any kind of coaching, whether it's pickup, dating, or relationship, where they have to have like their stuff completely locked down and then they can start dating. But like we all know some guys that do not have their shit together whatsoever and they're successful with girls. So it's just like you've got to just go out there and do it and, put in the reps, get the experience, and then meet the girls. And then from there, you can start to see which of these girls you want in a relationship, which then, segues into my next question. How do you qualify like a woman for like the traits that you might be looking for? Like this is long-term wifey material or girlfriend material, right? As opposed to being like, oh, she's hot and like I want that. Like, what kind of what would you suggest for guys who are looking for like long-term?
Yeah, so in my model, in my structure, I have what's called element 2. And I break element 2 up into 2 parts, which is social element 2 and romantic element 2, or relationship-based element 2. Social element 2 is like, would I want to be friends with this person? Right? If you wouldn't even want to be friends with somebody, like they don't have sort of the basic moral character and like, foundational paradigm, that aligns with you, probably not going to be good in a relationship, right? So I first kind of want to just get a general sense for how somebody operates in that regard. Like if I go out on a date with a woman and I detect any sort of shadiness, like she has a little shady gleam in her eye or selfishness, or like she's a little bit gamey, I'm usually very turned off by that. I'm still going to be polite. I'm still going to follow through with the date. Hey, it was nice to meet you, right? But she's getting that text the next day or something saying, hey, it was great to meet you, but, and this is talking about before I was engaged, right? Obviously, I'm engaged. So I'm putting myself back in those shoes, right? But assuming that she has sort of those core things down, I'm getting into relationship based qualifiers, which you have to ask yourself, what are the things that are really important and what are the things that aren't so important? So for me, things that are important, like, does she want to have a family? Does she, uh, how does she handle herself in a relationship? What does she believe is like an ample amount of time to spend with somebody? How does she handle disagreements and arguments? And you can get into some of these deeper relationship based qualifiers as you get to know somebody. You usually don't want to hit them with that right off the bat, but does she drink and party too much? Uh, so I want to find out the things that are really core to a relationship, but then the other things that don't matter as much, like what type of music does she listen to, right? It doesn't matter if we listen to the same type of music, we have the same hobbies. When we do have overlap in those departments, great. But I'm more interested in just somebody who has core values that are similar to mine. Does she believe in monogamy? Does she believe in fighting through tough times? Is she going to be somebody that argues well? You know, does she argue in a way that is fair and balanced? And, does she want to get to the truth of a matter, or is it more just about winning an argument? These are like the key things that are going to be driving us nuts or that we can accept, right? And then I would say one more thing to that. Anytime we're looking at a behavior or quality or whatever that we're not so sure about, we need to ask ourselves, if this doesn't change, is it something I can deal with? So, for example, if somebody drinks a little more than we like them to, and they say, oh, well, I'm going to cut back on drinking, I'm going to quit drinking. We have to ask ourselves, if they don't actually cut back on drinking, if this actually is the way they are, and this is the way they're going to be forever, can I deal with it, or will it eventually drive me nuts? So that's kind of just a quick snapshot of how I see it. So you have your core SE2 qualifiers, you have your RE2 qualifiers, which are your deeper relationship-based qualifiers. Yeah, is that a good snapshot?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, for me, one thing I've learned, hard lesson coming from both women and just like guys in general, is you have to accept the person for who they are, not what you would like them to be. Like we are not,
Mhm.
Captain Save-A-Ho or like trying to fix her. She is who she is. And if she changes and evolves, hopefully with you, if like you were saying, our core value is self-improvement, like that's awesome, but you can't
Mhm.
hope and wish that this person is going to change for you. You have to accept them for who they are. So I think that's a great point of having like the core values and that which can be like negotiable, or you can just kind of let it slide off. So as you're
I'll add
getting
a can I add one more thing to
uh,
that too? I'd say as well, every guy needs to sort of determine for himself, like, what level everything needs to be at. So for example, physical attraction, some guys are insistent on like finding a wife that is like the most amazing woman that they've ever been with, like in terms of physical attraction or sexual compatibility or whatever, and that's very high up on their list. So I'm very much about finding out what a guy's individual ideal is and helping him shape his game to that. You know what I mean? So as opposed to imposing it on me, I'll tell you how I do it. I'll tell you the way that my mind operates and what my preferences are. And if you want to model your game after my game, you certainly can. But I also recognize kind of that each client's a little bit different, And like, for example, guys frequently will say, I'm sure you get this as well. Like, yeah, I'm attracting women, but I'm not quite attracting like the hotter ones, the ones that really get me turned on. Okay, let's focus on that. That's what a guy wants to focus on. I'm not here to tell him looks aren't everything, whatever. Like, no, looks do matter. Physical attraction, sexual compatibility, these things do matter to most people, you know. So anyway, it's all about calibrating to the individual need of the guy, right?
Sure. I mean, I think that's the hallmark of an experienced and, wise coach to understand that while we can draw upon our own lived experience, and, techniques and strategies, it serves the client well when we can serve, like, what they're looking for and how it applies to them. Because I always tell, like, my clients, "I'm not trying to make you into a mini Asian playboy or anything like that,"
Mhm,
right? It's like,
mhm.
"Here's the system, here, you learn this, and then you can kinda plug and play as to what works for you," right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so as the guy is, hopefully trying to find this girlfriend, we're gonna go into like this deep emotional connection. And I had this sort of experience recently with a student who might have been maybe on like the Asperger's or autistic spectrum, to put it
Mhm.
politely, where he was just observing people and adopting certain mannerisms because that's, it's like, oh, this is how people are social. But, I noted to him he lacked a certain amount of kind of emotional connection, right? Maybe that was
Mhm.
the way he was raised, Asian culture, or maybe again, maybe he's on the spectrum. How do you make that emotional connection? Like we're past the attraction. I mean, we're past the I'm gonna make her laugh, all that kind of stuff. maybe on the first, second date, third date, whatever, establishing something real. Like, how do you suggest, your students and your clients do that, or what's in your model?
Yeah, so I tend to believe that that naturally grows over time. What I typically recommend is a cycling of the first three elements. So I'm giving a little bit of some of these concepts away here, which is good. I want to start, getting this stuff out there. I'm super excited about this book, like this book that I wrote. I've been teaching this method in a modified way for a while, but I finally have codified it and gotten it to this superstructure. It's more than a structure, it's a superstructure. So I have four elements, I'm sorry, but the first three elements, attraction, psychological bond, and physical bond. When we cycle those three elements repeatedly over a period of time, our fourth element, the emotional bond, tends to expand concurrently. So element four, the emotional bond, it's sort of with us from the very moments that we meet someone, though, right? When we first meet somebody, we're kind of saying, like, how does this person make me feel? Even if we're only doing it subconsciously. So I recommend paying attention to our emotions immediately, trying to read where she's at emotionally immediately. And then as we focus on these other three elements, while injecting it with element four will spiral up to what I call equilibrium, and eventually we fall in love. So it's that's the quick snapshot version of it. Yeah, when we focus on attraction, building a psychological bond, and physically bonding with the woman in appropriate and timely ways, and we can shift back and forth between those three elements, element four, the emotional bond, will sort of naturally spiral up. One last thing I'll say too about that is the emotional bond, element four, is actually uh, it is our intensity level calibrator when we are designing and deploying various tactics. So I came up with a concept for categorizing the various tactics and sequences that we use. So what we say, our body language, like the things that we actually do to build the different elements. Element four is an intricate part of that process because we're always impacting people emotionally, either in a way that's registered and that they pick up on and they feel, or subconsciously we could be impacting her emotionally. So I teach guys sort of how to have a subconscious emotional effect on the woman and also how to impact her consciously emotionally.
Yeah, I would say, like, we definitely want, or like, my recommendation is get a whiteboard, because right now we're like talking like the system, and it's hard
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
see, right? So you were saying like the first three elements were, what were they again?
Attraction, psychological bond, physical bond,
And
and
then
then
they go into
element
like,
four is emotional bond.
okay. Do you have, an example of like a psychological bond that you might teach like one of your students, right? Because, I already deal with like attraction, and the, physical bonding is kind of self-obvious. Obviously, one needs to be calibrated, but like, what's an example that you might teach a student of forming a psychological bond?
Yeah, so psychological bond is basically like a deeper rapport, okay? And I actually believe that for a relationship, we do want to actually appeal to the woman's logic. So there's a logical component to it. There's a lot that goes into element two, but one component that's very important is the logical part. So we've all heard in the community, right? Change her mood, not her mind. And we try to get guys to understand emotions better because, as you said, we deal with a lot of guys that are on the spectrum, or they're just very science minded. Maybe they work jobs where they're not around people a lot, or they're just more mission based. So teaching a guy to be more emotional is very important, right? But I do believe that when a woman is looking at a man and saying, at what way will this guy be in my life? Is he a short-term lover? Is he a friend? Is he relationship material? She is putting her emotions aside and trying to think logically, or she's at least trying to think logically in tandem with her emotions. So element two, uh, the psychological bond, we want to basically convey factual information about ourselves. Now, we want to spice it up and make it entertaining, generally speaking, but there's a time to just sort of put the the sizzle aside and just show her the steak, show her what she's actually dealing with. This is where I come from. This is my home. This is my job. These are my goals. And we pepper that in with making it fun. We don't want to just convey factual information about ourselves, but um, nonetheless, in my model, it is a part of getting to equilibrium with the elements. So, and yes, point taken about needing a whiteboard, man. I definitely need a whiteboard, and this would look great if I could draw it out. So it's
Yeah,
very laid out
so
very nicely in my book. So yeah.
yeah. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one thing I might do in using your model is maybe tell a story about like me buying my first home, right? And it's like
Mhm.
one, two bed, whatever. And then maybe kind of like future projecting or role playing in the future, how I see my life, my career. And then that's kind of what I'm hearing from you as we
Perfect.
interact in front of the
Yeah.
girl. That's what I'm hearing.
That would be an element to tactic. So the tactic would be to convey aspects of your personality. And then the technique that you're using is an actual story about your career and a future projection. So you've got techniques within a tactic, and that tactic is aimed at a higher level strategic goal, which is element two. So that's a perfect example.
Okay. Um, So at a certain point, so we're building a psychological bond, the physical bond, the emotional bond. And like, let's say the guy has been on, multiple dates. Like there's that sexual chemistry, maybe they've even slept together and he's interested in being exclusive. Now, again, this is a Gen Z,
Mhm.
generation. Like what's the term all the Gen Z kids use? Like ethical polyamory, or
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
situationship. Like
Uh,
it's gone even beyond when we were kids, when it was like just a fuck buddy, right? It's like
yeah,
all
yeah.
this.
Friend with
Um,
benefits.
how do you address when he wants to be exclusive? He likes the girl. Like, what do you suggest for him, like in having that conversation?
Yeah, so the best situation is where I don't want to say the best situation, but I would say, one of the optimal situations where we can compel the woman to initiate the relationship conversation, where she sits us down and says, "What are we?" Right? Like, I'm sure you've experienced this. I've experienced this in my younger years where you're just kind of having fun
What
and
are
dating a
we?
chick and hooking up. And then she's like, "We need to have a talk." And you're like, "Oh, shit, here it comes." Right. Or you're excited for the talk because you feel the same way about her. Right. Now, that being said, there are some women that aren't going to initiate that conversation and they're going to wait until you do, or maybe you just want to initiate that conversation. So, my advice would be this: having that conversation sooner than we, having that conversation prematurely, if she's not ready yet, if she's not on the same page, is the same thing as kissing her too soon. We don't want to kiss her as soon as possible. I mean, sometimes if we kiss her quickly, it can have a compelling response. It can make her attraction levels rise, right? But in general, I'm a believer in kissing her when the moment is right. So if we kiss her prematurely before she's decided she's attracted to us, maybe it makes her attraction levels go up, or maybe she goes, and she feels iffy about us, right? So in a similar fashion, I would say, you want to make sure that the moment is sort of right to have that conversation. Make sure that she's really into you. You got to look for signs, that is she calling you all the time? Are you seeing her consistently? You're having consistent sex. You've had conversations about what she's looking for. So she's interested in a relationship, right? Then I would say it depends on how you went about meeting her. So, for example, my fiance, I met online. A lot of cold approach experience here, a lot of social circle experience, but I also am a big believer in online game. Even though there's all sorts of stats that say how difficult it is. I've always had an okay time for myself online. And that's how I met my fiance. So I said to her when I wanted to be exclusive, that I wanted to delete my apps, you know. So you could say to a woman, "So I was thinking about something today and I want to run it by you." You can almost show a little bit of, hesitation in your voice. I was thinking about something today. I want to run it by you. Yeah, I took down my dating apps, and just look at her and pause, and she'll probably like nod, like, and go on, right? Yeah, I kind of just want to focus on you. I'm not saying you have to take down your dating apps, but it'd be a lot cooler if you did. So that's a good soundbite right there. Not saying you have to take down your dating apps, but it'd be a lot cooler if you did. And if you've done this properly and if she's ready, she's on board, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I like that because it is suggestive and leading without being like an ultimatum, right? It's
mhm.
not like you're not forcing a binary decision on her to commit right then and there,
Yeah.
right? So I like that.
Here's another one for you. So if you met her on another platform, let's say you just met her in a day game approach or social circle or night game or whatever, right? Uh, you can be chatting with her and say, so I was talking to my mom today and I was talking about you. Don't get too full of yourself now. Yes, I was talking about you. And I almost called you my girlfriend. I was like, and then I stopped myself because I was like, wait a second. Are we boyfriend, girlfriend? I mean, we've been seeing each other for a month now or 3 weeks or whatever it is, right? Is this my girlfriend? I don't know. And then just kind of throw the ball in her court. What do you think? Should I have said girlfriend or not? Do you call
Okay.
me your boyfriend?
Yeah, it's sort of like fill in the blank, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I like that too.
Yeah.
And then that really segues into my next question is how often should you see each other as you lead up to this, or even in once you're exclusive? Are you seeing her like 2, 3 times a week? I mean, this is obviously before you guys move in together, but is there a point where it's like too little, too much?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, an average out there, right? So if you have a passionate, intense relationship right from the start, maybe you guys hook up on night one or night two, and it's kind of on right away, and you know that you're digging someone, right? You can sort of throw some exclusivity parameters around that if you want. And the way that you can maybe word it is that, hey, like, I'm not saying that you have to fall in love with me. I'm not saying we have to be like boyfriend, girlfriend, but like, I don't really like hooking up with multiple people at once. Like there are a lot of diseases out there and it just makes me feel a little bit weird. So I really dig you. I've really been enjoying the last 3 days or the last 5 days with you. It's been fucking hot. Or, you say something like the last few days or whatever. Uh, I don't really want to see anybody else. I know it's kind of weird maybe putting that on you because I'm essentially implying the same thing that it'd be really cool if we could be kind of exclusive. So yeah, I mean, are you seeing anybody else or are you down to kind of like make this exclusive? Because I don't want to be just focusing exclusively on you and you're going off and doing your thing. If you're going to have your fun, I'm going to have my fun. Right. So you can have a conversation sort of on that end. If it's a short, you just met her a week ago, but you kind of, and that can backfire though. As you know, if you try to put that exclusivity on her before she's ready, and if she is seeing other people and she's not ready, you know, it can backfire. But I've actually found a pretty high degree of success doing that. I think because I play a lot of solid game leading up to the first time having sex, I tend to build a really solid connection instead of just going for sex. So usually by the time I've slept with somebody for 5 days or a week or whatever, they kind of are already tending toward wanting to see me exclusively anyway. That's not always the case, but um, on average, though, I would say I want to be seeing somebody 2 or 3 days a week, usually. I would say once maybe during the week or twice during the week for just a couple hours because maybe we're busy and working, and then a longer day on the weekend. So I would say on average, anywhere between 10 and 15 hours a week of like FaceTime, plus texting and maybe talking on the phone a bit. And maybe we want to repeat that cycle for like a couple weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before we pop the exclusivity question. That doesn't mean that we're fully in love. You can fall in love with somebody that quickly, but you don't have to be in love with somebody to want to be exclusive with them. So you can always throw that out there to the woman as well. Like, look, I'm not saying I'm head over heels in love with you. I'm not ready to marry you. Okay. Don't get too full of yourself. I always like to throw in those little playful jabs, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm full blown in love with you and I'm ready to make babies and live happily ever after with you, but I have been enjoying the last few weeks with you. We've been spending some good time together. Are we boyfriend, girlfriend? Are we exclusive now? Can I delete my apps? Because I kind of want to get rid of this Tinder app. It's fucking annoying, right?
My Tinder's blowing up with all these hoes, man.
There's a little subtle implication there, but it's actually not you know, It's not a lie. When I'm doing my online dating and I'm proactively approaching and everything, I usually do have quite a few options. So,
Yeah. I think it raises a good point, where a lot of guys confuse, I think the psychological term is like limerence, right? Like the early days, like it feels like love, but it's just like all these hormones and passion,
mm,
right? But I truly believe like love, relationship, it takes work. And like it
yes.
takes work. It isn't something that you just simply fall into. Like you've got to work at love. You got to work at a relationship to make it work, especially the long term, which goes into my next question. How do you deal with like you're now boyfriend and girlfriend? How do you deal with the eventual like baggage, your baggage, her baggage that comes up? How do you both deal with it as a couple? Or maybe you see a red flag in her. Like,
Mhm,
what do you
mhm.
do in those circumstances?
Yeah, so I do try to get a little bit of that out in the open early on. So one of my favorite qualifying questions for a woman is like, "What are some of your quirks?" Right?
That's
And
good.
then if she's hesitant to answer, I'll say, "I'll go first if you want," right? So I'll tell her like, "Look, I can be a little bit intense about work. I'm generally a positive dude, but I can go into these hyper serious like work tunnels where all I'm fucking doing is working, and it's like, you need to just come over and close my laptop and say, 'That's enough, Eric. Like we're turning it off,' right?" So I'll basically talk about some of my quirks and my imperfections in an attempt to get her to talk about some of hers. I'm not afraid to ask questions like, how do you handle arguments in a relationship? Do you fight to win, or are you after the truth? And then I'm always throwing those flirty looks, like I'm
No, th
watching
th
you, right?
yeah, that's good because, like, there are some girls that will use, like, emotional blackmail. Like, you
Mhm.
open up a vulnerability, and then they'll remember and use that as blackmail. Like, you've gotta
Yeah.
definitely watch out for those type of, like, girls who like to use that as a tactic.
I definitely think there are some women that like will uncover my imperfections and then exploit them, like it's happened. Generally I do a pretty good job though of qualifying women. All of my serious relationships have been really solid. I don't do toxic relationships. Like anytime there's toxicity early in a relationship, like I'm out. So by the time I'm in love with somebody, committed to them, and like that's it, we're doing it, we're doing the relationship thing. I've generally have a pretty good sense of who they are. Every now and then I'm surprised and some behavior will come out later that I wasn't expecting, but man, I've been very lucky. I've dated some very nice women. My fiance is super nice, super kind, understanding, patient, all the things that I look for. Um, but, inevitably, when somebody's imperfections come out, I think it's important, first of all, to just see the big picture and just to remember that nobody's going to be perfect. You're not going to find the perfect person. They're not going to be exactly like you in every single way. So I will try to find something that I see in myself in whatever behavior I don't like. I'm like, okay, they're like this, but I'm also like this. So first of all, I will find a way to see how I could be, you know, uh, counterbalance to that in some way with an imperfection of my own, right? If it's a small, minor thing, I usually would just let it go. You know what I mean? Just love the person's small little quirks, their imperfections. Does your girlfriend leave lights on? You know what I mean? You're gonna freak out at her because she left the light on, you know what I mean? Or is it just like if my fiance, because my fiance for a little while was actually leaving this one hallway light on, right? I didn't see the hallway light on. I'm like, Katerina, what the hell? I would just kind of look at it and I would actually feel love. I would feel this endearing sense of like, oh, like she left the light on again, and I'd shut it off for her. And I wouldn't even say anything half the time. I'd just shut it off. Right. Um, Bigger issues, bigger strife, you have to talk about it. Generally speaking, I'm sure there are couples out there that play this game of just like forgive and forget. Let's just brush it under the rug. If that works for them, that works for them, right? Uh, for me personally, I think communication is very important. So I want to talk things out. I generally like the notion that not to go to bed angry, address issues when they come up, always try to be kind, always try to hear the other person's point of view, be a good listener, do that whole thing where you listen until the other person feels understood as opposed to when you think you understand. So just basic, good, solid communication and seeing if you can work through it. And then I'm also a believer too that if you can't, if you hit a roadblock and you're at an impasse, get professional help. If that person matters that much for you, go see a couples counselor. I've done it. I've been
Yeah.
to couples counseling.
Yeah, definitely. Just like, we go to coaches, whether it's for finances or public speaking or dating coaching and pickup, it's important to go to professionals who are used to dealing with that. Which actually goes into what I was gonna talk about. When you started dating Katarina, how did you raise up the fact that you studied pickup, dating coach,
Mhm.
and do you suggest the guys out there to tell their girlfriend that they studied pickup or took a boot camp or anything like that?
Okay, so generally speaking, I'm a fan of being honest. Like that being said, I do think that studying this stuff is something that you can kind of keep to yourself, you know. Now, the caveat to that would be is if you're really into it, right? Like if you're into the game and this is like you're all about it.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, you love reading about it, you love studying it, you're into it. There's a cool way that you can have that conversation with a woman. And what I found is they get it. You know what I mean? Like when I first got into this stuff, I hid it from everybody. I was like, oh my God, if my friends from high school knew I was studying this stuff, like I'd have to walk a circle and get punched in the arm, right? Like I felt like it was really, I was very shy and like, there were just a lot of bad apples like in the industry that made it just made me feel weird and creepy. So I
Yes.
kept this stuff completely to myself. But then little by little, I started to be more open with it, especially once I started coaching, right? And I found that when I talked to women about it, just kind of honestly and openly, and I told them my story of how I got into it and how it sucked me in, they kind of just nod their heads and are like, makes sense, you know? So I have a lot of explaining to do because I'm a professional coach. I am a wingman and business partner, and now U.S. sponsor and agent of Mystery, the pickup artist from the VH1 show. Right. So I have to explain a little bit above and beyond that. I'm just like, a normal guy might just have to explain like that he's into reading these books and studying this stuff. I have to explain like a whole big story there.
Yeah. I mean, the way I suggest it to my students, as you say, it takes so much of your mental processing power to try to keep up a facade or a
Mhm.
lie, right? That if you do feel obligated to tell her, it's like sort of like being adopted, right? You don't have to tell people that you're adopted if you don't want to. It's like no one's business.
Yeah.
But if you do choose to, there's a way to frame it, right? It's like because
Mhm.
everyone went through COVID and we all kind of become like COVID puppies and we experienced a lot of anxiety going out into public that we needed a little bit of help getting confidence and talking to like complete strangers and you're really anxious about learning, how to talk to a beautiful girl like you, right? It's like there's a way to
Mhm.
frame it positively. Like I wouldn't suggest that guys like, yeah, I studied pickup to like fuck a lot of bitches. Like,
Yeah.
there's a good and a bad way.
Yeah, for sure. And you
Okay.
can also suggest too that look, not everybody that takes coaching is at rock bottom.
Hmm.
I work with guys that are total newbies. They're virgins. They're 30 or 40-year-old virgins, right? Very little social skill, maybe have some kind of psychological illness or some kind of disability, autism, whatever. Then you have kind of your mid-range student, right? He's had a few girlfriends, he's hooked up with a few women, he's got a general sense of how things go down, but he's not where he wants to be. And then you actually get the guys that have pretty good game, but they're interested in pushing themselves even further. They're just really into this stuff. They're really into training it, studying it all the time. So I would say too, if a guy is focusing a lot of his time and energy into this, then yeah, you don't want to keep up a facade and pretend, you don't want to hide everything from your girlfriend. But if you're somebody who's just kind of learning this and you're looking to just get a baseline of skill and get into a relationship and just sort of work on it peripherally while you focus mostly on other areas of your life, I don't know if it's always necessary to tell the woman. It can kind of be your like thing.
Yeah. It's just a
So
class that you took once upon a time.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So as they're in the relationship for an extended amount of time, one of the things that invariably starts to happen is how do the guys keep the flame alive, like the attraction alive when you've been dating 3, 6, 9 months, maybe even an entire year? How do you keep it alive?
Yeah, I do think that's very important. And actually, my model, the four elements that we want to build up that eventually reach equilibrium and spiral us into love in my model, the vortex of love, if you will, those want to be continually worked on for life. Okay, so I believe that we should always be trying to build a deeper psychological bond with our lover. Element two, I think we should always be trying to deepen the physical connection. Element three. Element three also deals with just spatial awareness in general. It's not just physical contact, but spatial awareness, the emotional bond, element four, and then attraction, element one, right? And I do think element one is kind of a trickier one to maintain because those feelings of euphoria and excitement may die down a little bit as we get further into a relationship with somebody. So I am a big fan of just sort of mixing things up, doing new things together, spending time together, spending time apart. If you need to spend a little time apart and do things on your own, sometimes you take a weekend trip with your buddies or you focus on something you want to focus on. You're spending a little less time with your partner, and then you come back to her, and all of a sudden the chemistry explodes. So every situation is different. Everybody's preferred level of physical attraction and personality based attraction are different. But I do believe in trying to take care of our health. I believe in just continuing to try to grow and become the best person that we can be, whatever that means to each guy, and then attempting to convey that to the woman. Humor is a big part of it for me anyway. Again, this is, I think, a good general rule of thumb to follow, though some couples may not really be cracking jokes at each other all the time. But I think, the stereotype when we see like a movie or a TV show is that couples that have been together for a long time, they have a healthy level of sarcasm and playful banter and humor, so that's a big one. Always keeping her laughing. Those are some of, quick ideas that come to mind.
Yeah, I would say that one of the problems I see, it is sort of like a good problem, if you will, as a coach, is they get the girl. They learn how to get the girl. They get enough girls, and then finally they get the girlfriend. But then they kind of like let it go. Right?
Hmm.
Like, they stop working on themselves, and bro, like, it's still, like, a game. You're not, like, gaming her, you're still working on the relationship. You can't take it for granted, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't let your confidence simply disappear, because otherwise she's gonna wonder, "Where did that attractive man go?" And so, one of the things I like to say to students when it comes to like the relationship, maintaining it, is we know in pickup, like, DHVs or attraction stories, attraction switch stories, right? And that's about like showcasing our lifestyle or values and telling a story about how cool or awesome we are. What I suggest to students in a relationship is build the story, an attraction story together. Right?
Mm.
Like,
Hmm.
you and her do something, and that's your story. It's like having the in joke, but now it's a story of some adventure, some hardship, some challenge that really bonded you 2 together, and I think that can really help when you start to think, instead of "I did this," now it's
Hmm.
"We did this."
I like that.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
So
Yeah.
one last question, this has been great stuff. One last question is, how do you know, and how did you, or propose marriage? Like, that's like popping the question. That's like, I'm sure,
Yeah.
long term, but a lot of guys are like, they're scared, like that they love her, they've been together a year, 2 years, whatever. It's like, is he ready? And how do you suggest he do it, and how did you do it?
Yeah. So, man, first of all, falling in love just crept up on me. I've been in a few situations where I think all of my serious relationships, and especially this last one, like I just didn't see it coming. Like I was just dating, having a good time, focusing on the process, which is, I practice what I preach. I tell my clients, focus on the process and kind of the results are going to, shake out for you. So I'm focusing on the process and dating my fiance for a period of time, and I just found myself in love. And when I had that chat with her, because I actually did initiate the chat,
Mhm.
before I told her that I deleted my apps and whatnot, I was sitting with her and I was telling her how amazing she was and this and that. And she apparently thought I was about to break up with her because I was saying some nice things and she thought there was a but coming in there, right?
Okay.
And I just looked at her and I said, and I'm in love with you. And she was kind of again looking at me, kind of like waiting for that but. And I was like, there's no buts. Like, I'm in love with you. And she was like, it was a really amazing moment. But then somewhere shortly after that, I just knew. How did I know? My gosh, there were so many signs. I mean, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but like I will sometimes like pray to my dead ancestors. For example, my nonna on my Italian side, I'll pray to her. I'll pray to my grandparents on both sides. I'll ask them for wisdom. I'll pray to my brother who passed away. Give me a sign that I'm with the right woman. Everything's looking right on my end. All four elements are at equilibrium. I'm in love and I feel it expanding. And at some point, I just knew. I just said, that's it. She's the one for me. So I went and got her a ring. We had actually already talked about rings. We had already talked about marriage. So I kind of had a general sense of what she wanted. But I went and picked out a ring. I didn't tell anybody about it. Didn't tell my mom, dad, nobody. Smuggled it in my carry-on to Italy. We went on a vacation
Oh.
to Italy together. And I proposed to her outside the church that my grandparents and I think my great grandparents got married in. So
Uh,
it was really funny. Like, we had just finished dinner and I was taking her for a walk up to the church. My brother was going back to the States and he said, can I come for a walk with you? And I was like, oh, shit. And I was like, sure. Right. So he starts walking with us. And I was like, hey, why don't you go get our nephews? Because our nephews were with us too. And he's like, right now? And I'm like, yeah, just go get them and come back. And even Katerina was looking at me like, why are you sending your brother away? It's his last night. He wants to walk around the town. And I'm like, just go get him. Right. So we're walking along, and the whole time Katerina's thinking to herself, and she's saying that she's like, this isn't right. This is, why did you send him away? Right. And I'm like, I
and you're
just need,
sweating bullets.
basically, yeah. I'm like, I just need a moment, just you and me. Right. We get up to this big archway that you have to walk through to get to the church. And there's a bat that is literally every 5 seconds swooping down chest level, like a bat. And she sees the bat and she's like, I'm not going through there. And I'm like, we're going through. It's like put my arm around her and I'm like, oh my God, if this bat flies in my face, right? So we get to the archway and I'm like, she's huddling in my chest. We get through and we sit on this ledge, look at the church that my grandparents were married in. We're talking, and then we're about to leave because she actually said, that's it. We have to go get your brother. This isn't right. So I'm like, okay, let's go get him. Right. We stand up, and before we leave, I turn back to her. I put my forehead against hers because that's kind of our thing. We'll sit here forehead to forehead and just, you know, imagine this energy cycling back and forth between us. And then I just smiled at her and I got on my knee. And she's like, what's happening right now? And I was like, what's happening. Pulled the ring out, asked her to marry me. She said yes. We cried, we embraced, we took a few pictures. We went back and told the family. So,
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. That's great. It's very, very romantic, very, very heartfelt,
Yeah.
right? And like
Yeah.
it's like the ability to improvise or deal with obstacles as they come. So like I'm
Yeah.
very happy for you. So again, congratulations.
Thank you, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, thank you.
As I always tell my students who do go on that next level of adventure, right? That's I don't really see myself going that way. I'm not saying never say never, right? But it's I don't feel that for me at this point, but they're going on that next adventure. And so
Hmm.
take everything that you've experienced into that relationship because everything that you learned is going to help you in the future. Um and speaking of which, Eric, what's in store for your future? What are you up to? And how can our audience find you?
Yeah, so like I said, datingcoachformen.com is my newest iteration here. I'm technically still Coast to Coast Dating Coach LLC, doing business now as datingcoachformen.com. Uh, I am writing a book, a 250,000 word book
Whew.
that it was meant to be like if I'm being honest, I'm trying to say this without ego, though it's going to sound a little egotistical. I wanted to write the most comprehensive, best book ever written about the game, or I was at least going to write my best book possible and see where it lands. What's that saying? Shoot for the moon and maybe you'll land among the stars. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I seriously set out to write this book from a really, really pure place. It's not a lead magnet. It's not like read my book so I can upsell you into coaching. I mean, certainly there's desire to acquire clients, right? But this book is a standalone book. It's going to be out January or February 2025. And it's my proudest accomplishment, both personally and professionally. So it's going to be on datingcoachformen.com. I recently launched some social media channels. Some of them are growing, some of them are not. I think you mentioned this. You're like, you never know what's going to hit. You create
Yeah.
a video and some of them get a bunch of views and some of them not so much. So I literally just started posting about 2 months ago. I'm also partnering up with Mystery, the pickup artist. So we've got multiple boot camps coming up in 2025. San Diego, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Chicago, New York. So, you can reach out to me basically at datingcoachformen.com. And if you want to take training with me, you can, or if you want to get on a boot camp with me in Mystery, you can do that as well. And, yeah, my main focus right now, as you can see, I've talked about it many times on this interview, is the book. I'm putting the final touches on it right now. It's fucking traumatizing. I know you've written a book. It is like a traumatizing experience. It takes so much to write a
Oh,
book.
yeah.
But yeah, it's called
It
The Vortex of Love.
Vortex of Love.
The Vortex of Love.
Okay, alright. Yeah, it's like your magnum opus, right? So it's like your pride and joy, but it sounds like it's going to be quite, the piece of work that encapsulates so much of your entire system, and hopefully, like, when it's ready, you're gonna be able to put it out there, and all the guys are gonna be able to read it. So it's datingcoachformen.com. You've got live boot camps with Mystery coming up, and I think you have also like virtual, like online
Yeah, I
programs
do
too.
Zoom coaching. Yeah, we do live online workshops with Mystery, but I also do one-on-one Zoom coaching. I fly to guys' home cities and work with them in person. They can fly out to Chicago to work with me. So I'm doing as much as I can. I'd love to partner up with you on some projects. I'm basically trying to work with as many people as I can. Obviously, people that I feel like are a good fit for me. And everything I'm seeing from you, JT, and I've known you for a long time, even when I first got into this, you've always been a really upright dude. I've always respected
Thank you.
your style. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally down for, a little bit of live collaboration, sort of like, Avengers Assemble, if you will.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be cool, man?
All right. So again, thank you so much, Eric from datingcoachformen.com. This has been a great conversation. I hope our audience has enjoyed and learned about relationships, girlfriends, and marriage. Again, thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our video. I hope you liked it. And make sure you guys subscribe to this channel and watch all our other videos. Great news too. Every Monday, we'll be putting out a new weekly video. That's right, we've got educational seminars, street interviews, fun in-field pickup videos, and anything else we can come up with that's fun for you guys to watch. So check back.